Mark Rogers TV on college football, and much is being made of the ACC's four-game sweep over the SEC on rivalry weekend. So they're the four traditional matchups of the SEC rivalries outside of the conference on the final day of the season, when you got Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, Kentucky, and Louisville. And also we've got a game with South Carolina taking on Clemson for the rights to the Palmetto State. Let's put these games in perspective. So we credit the ACC. Those are the game schedules. Those are the rivalries, and they won four consecutive games on the field. Credit the ACC. But let's put those four games and the entire slate of non-conference games in perspective, both for the ACC and the SEC. So first, we've got Florida State over Florida, 24-19. Gators went up 9-0 in this game, had just picked off Jameis Winston. We're going in for a touchdown that could possibly made it 16-0, or at the least sat right on the football right there and went up 12-0. Then there was a deflected pass. The ball was taken all the way 95 yards for a touchdown, and it's a completely different ball game from there, as Florida was up just 9-7 again instead of 16-0 or 12-0. Okay, this is a 1 versus 8 matchup. So this isn't simply the ACC beat the SEC. This is the best team, no question, in the ACC, the number 1 seed with 28 consecutive wins, defeating what we have placed as an 8 seed in the SEC. Best team in the ACC defeats the 8th best team in the seeding process in the SEC, and they only win 24-19 in the games at home. So take that under consideration. Georgia, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's had a fine season. They finish off at 10-2. They go 6-2 in the ACC. They are the number 2 seed as the coastal champion to Florida State's undefeated record. So Georgia Tech, the number 2 seed. Georgia, a pretty high seed for the SEC, a 4 seed. We place them in the 4th spot based on conference record and looking at tiebreakers. So Georgia Tech defeats Georgia. They come back from 7 down. They win it in overtime 30-24. Huge win for the Yellow Jackets. They had lost 12 of 13 against Georgia. But again, take into consideration, Georgia Tech right now, I don't necessarily think that they're the second best team in the ACC, but Clemson would be the other second best given an option. And of course, Tech won that game decidedly, like 26-3. Deshaun Watson out of the game for Clemson at quarterback. But again, Georgia Tech 2 seed, Georgia 4 seed. Pretty comparable game there, and it's an overtime win for Tech between the hedges. Clemson, South Carolina. Okay, let's take this one into consideration. South Carolina has fielded 3 consecutive 11-win teams that finished in the top 10, and they have cleaned the clocks of Clemson for 5 consecutive years. So Clemson gets a huge win. This game is huge for Clemson and South Carolina. When they talk about rivalries, they go outside of the conference. They point to this one, number 1. So we do not discount that Clemson won it on the field against their rival. Clemson, though, if you use the seeding process, at 6-2 in the ACC is the number 3 seed in the 14-team ACC. South Carolina, on the other hand, at 3-5 in the SEC, would be the 10th seed in the SEC. So again, if you're trying to compare the conferences, it's like apples and oranges, 3 seed versus the 10 seed. And yes, the Tigers win it over the Gamecocks 35-17. And finally, Louisville and Kentucky. This game played at Louisville. Cardinals win it 44-40. Entertaining football game. Kentucky jumped out 13-0, but the Cardinals come back and win as expected. They were a 13-point favorite in this game, but they only win it by 4. Okay, yes, the Cardinals are the better team, but again, it was just a 4-point game at Louisville. Cardinals would be the 4th ranked or seeded team in the ACC, just behind, again, Florida State and Clemson in their division, and Georgia Tech, the champion of the Coastal, with a 5-3 record. Okay, for Kentucky, they would be the 13th seeded team in the SEC. How do we get that? They went 2-6. The worst record in the SEC was Vandy at 0-8. Kentucky tied with Arkansas at 2-6. If you look at Kentucky's record versus the East, and playing in the East, while Arkansas played in the much stronger Western Division and defeated 2 ranked teams in LSU and Ole Miss, barely lost to Mizzou, the Eastern champion. Yes, Kentucky, the 13th seed, loses to the 4th seed Louisville. So you've got a 1 versus an 8, a 2 versus a 4, a 3 versus a 10, and a 4 versus a 13. That puts it into perspective. And oh yes, don't forget the Georgia win over Clemson, the second game of the season, 45-23. So Georgia defeated Clemson straight up in resounding fashion in the second half. So the ACC did win 4 out of 5 this year against the SEC, but take the seedings into consideration. All right, overall, the SEC, is it the best conference in America? Well, I believe it is, but objectively, I don't know that we can say that. The SEC only went 5-6, 5-6 against the other Power 5 conferences. So we just went through the 5 games against the ACC in which they went 1-4. Their best wins, LSU beat Wisconsin, barely. Auburn won at Kansas State, really good win. Arkansas over a marginal Texas Tech team that finished, I believe, 3-8, 3-9, 3-9, 4-8, 4-8. West Virginia and Alabama. Alabama, the number 1 ranked team in the country, and West Virginia only loses that game by 10. That was a very close game. They took it down to the last 5 minutes, and West Virginia is a 7-5 team, like a 6 or 7 seed in the Big 12. So that's not a comparable matchup. Likewise, in defending the SEC, Tennessee losing to Oklahoma should be expected. Tennessee's like a 12 seed, 11 or 12 seed in the SEC, and Oklahoma would be a top 4 or 5 seed, basically a top 4 seed in the Big 12. The other loss, though, Indiana over Missouri. And, of course, this is one that's really going to hurt the SEC. And it was played out in Columbia. Indiana, the worst team in the Big Ten, finally got a Big Ten win over Purdue at 1-7, defeats Missouri, a 7-1 SEC team. So the SEC at just 5-6 this season against the Power 5. But against the ACC, you have to take those seedings into consideration. Okay, for the ACC, they got 2 wins over Notre Dame, which looked really good at one point. And if Notre Dame could have acted through the pick play much better, they would have gained the win at Florida State, and that would have looked really bad at this point for the ACC. But the 2 wins over Notre Dame by Louisville and Florida State in 2 very, very close games. So the Irish were playing well at that point, even though the Louisville game was just 2 weeks ago. Okay, Florida State defeats Oklahoma State. Not a big deal there. Oklahoma State not good this year at 5-7. USC. BC defeated USC. USC, a strong team at 8-4. Duke over Kansas, not a big deal. Virginia Tech over Ohio State. Remember that one. And yes, we do believe the Buckeyes are much, much better than they were. But that is not necessarily speculation, but the record shows it. Virginia Tech defeated Ohio State and the Hokies at 6-6. Okay, none of the losses are horrible for the ACC outside the Power 5 or outside of the conference play. Maryland defeated Syracuse, not a bad loss. Maryland 5-3 in the Big Ten. Iowa beat Pitt. That's a decent loss. That's not a big deal. Iowa finished 7-5. Notre Dame over North Carolina 50-43. So North Carolina, not a contending team in the ACC, barely lost at Notre Dame. Nebraska over Miami. Miami finishes at 6-6. Nebraska finished at 9-3 in the Big Ten, so not a bad loss. And UCLA over Virginia. We know the Bruins, until that last weekend of the season, looked like they were going to the Pac-12 championship game, and they finished at 9-3. They defeat Virginia, a 5-7 team. So the ACC really didn't have any bad losses outside the Power 5. Those would all be expected. They lost to higher-seeded teams in other conferences. And they had some nice wins again. BC over USC in particular, and Virginia Tech over Ohio State, in addition to the wins in the SEC, plus Florida State and Louisville over Notre Dame. Keep in mind, there were some East Carolina-type games, Cincinnati, some other non-Power 5 conference games against decent teams, Boise State as well, in losing to the Ole Miss Rebels on opening night. So, 56 non-conference games played by both the ACC and the SEC outside of conference. 56 games, because that's 14 teams playing 4 non-conference games each. They should be playing a ton of Power 5 conference games. The SEC played 11. They went 5-6. That has to change to be able to accurately account for these teams and compare them between conferences. The ACC will give them a little bit more credit in scheduling 16 of 56. Still not good enough. against the other Power 5. Okay, would love to hear what you have to say about the analysis here and your take right here on Mark Rogers TV.